Jai Bhagwan, Jai Bhagwan, Jai Bhagwan. So good to be back here, Satsang. And I have to be honest, recording this or going live is always a little bit unusual because you feel this like other entity here, right? And feels less natural in the beginning. But hopefully that kind of settles itself down and it can become more effortless and easeful. So thank you so much for coming tonight. So we'll just start with a little meditation and a little bit of chanting. Okay, so first I'll just invite you to close your eyes. And I'll share with you one of the observations from sitting on the lanai in Hawaii. Just noticing the breath of the ocean coming and going. The breath of the wind coming and going. The breath of the day, sunrise, sunset. And we know that the breath is the bridge between the gross physical body and the subtle mental body. And then if we want to change our mental, emotional, spiritual state, we simply change the breath. And sometimes changing the breath is simply bringing attention to the breath. And simply by bringing attention to the breath, there's a natural softening that occurs. And then the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual state naturally begins to shift. So as a yogi, one of the main practices and teachings is around becoming a master of prana. And prana is considered God, consciousness, love. And as we become a master of prana, learning where we spend our prana, where we save our prana, how we use our prana, we begin to turn our attention to the places that help us to build our prana, to the natural self-regulation as opposed to the depletion that occurs from being unconscious. And in the yogic scriptures, this is called brahmacharya. The moderation of sensual pleasures, of desires. That arise from biological prana. And the attunement to the pranic field. And through that process, we're building our vitality, increasing our vitality, not in a doing way, simply by a attentive attunement, through an investigation. And as we master prana, we're really tuning to the relationship that prana has in our day-to-day outplay. And we're not using the mind to master it, we're simply paying attention, observing, watching, noticing when we are in fear, noticing when we are in fight or flight, noticing when we are at our edge. And with the breath, the bridge, we can instantly shift the reactive patterns. That keep us bound. And then prana will self-regulate itself. The body will self-regulate itself. The emotions and the mind and the spirit will all self-regulate itself. Nature. So we'll continue with the Shitali breath. Breathing in softly through the nostrils. And exhaling through slightly pursed lips, as if you're blowing through a small straw. Breathing in, filling the lungs fully. And then breathing out, blowing through a small straw. Allow your attention to be placed on the exhalation. Following the exhalation all the way to the end. Notice how each exhalation becomes a little more subtle. Noticing how each exhalation becomes a little softer, a little more imperceptible. Until you feel yourself drawn into meditation. Just simply allow yourself to soak there. Now let's bring the hands together. And allow them to come to rest at the center of the chest. And join me in the Asatama prayer if you're familiar with it. If you're not, just simply allow it to soak into you and feel the vibration. Sadagaha Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Shri Guru Te Namaha. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. As you're ready, open your eyes. Jai Bhagwan. Jai Bhagwan. We have some folks with us from Ucluelet. Hi. So Jen and John are in Ucluelet for a training with Ian Finn, and so Jen just sent a message to us saying hello. So that's great, welcome. Okay. So what I first spoke about in our meditation was around brahmacharya, and it came to me today actually as I was just sitting with the preparation for this evening's satsang. And I realized that all of the yamas and niyamas are actually pointing at the eternal truth. And they're pointing to the eternal truth, how to be a yogi, really. It's like how to be a yogi, like the 10 steps on how to be a yogi. And what's interesting about the yamas and niyamas is that when we first read them and first start to study them and attempt to understand them, it's very intellectual. It's very intellectual. So it's almost like it's a hard way of entering the practices through those 10 yamas and niyamas, right? They lay the foundation for intention, but really it's hard to I'm gonna not be violent to anybody, right? And I'm not gonna be attached to anything, right? And so actually it's the layers of living a yogic lifestyle that start to peel away those pieces, and then that becomes how we are, right? That becomes how we are. But really, those yamas and niyamas are a roadmap, and they're pointing to how to live a yogic lifestyle. And it's not from a methodology of, if I do it like this, I'm going to get somewhere. It's actually the understanding of what's underneath that and what is life as a yogi. What is that? So that is what I wanted to bring forth this evening, because the last time we gathered together, we were speaking about ashram life. And the time before that was around satsang, right? So here we are now. Okay, so we understand satsang, we understand more of an ashram life, and so what is it to be a yogi? What is that? And I don't live in an ashram, even though we speak about our beautiful yoga center being ashram-like, and we have a beautiful community. But when I go home, maybe I'm not in the ashram, maybe I'm a mother or a wife or a daughter, and things get very entangled, and I don't feel very peaceful, right? So then, what is life as a yogi so that I become more established in that, and how do I cultivate that in my day-to-day life so that it feels more like I am living in an ashram, in a sacred space, that I'm living with more in community, that I'm living in relationship with myself and others, and that I'm constantly seeking the truth, which is what satsang is, right? So that's why I thought we could break it down a little bit more and explore what is a yogi. Yeah? And then there was a direct question that came from one of our sisters, and she asked about Aprigraha. So interestingly enough, I thought, well, I answered her question, kind of, in an email. And then I thought, well, let me sit with that a little bit more and see what that is. And so as that bubbled up, I began to realize again that, Aprigraha is also pointing to what is it to be a yogi, non-attachment. And then brahmacharya, which we spoke about, what is that? Oh, managing of prana. Master of prana. Oh, well, that's all about being in the now, right? Oh, and the other yamas and niyamas, like telling the truth and being, non-harmful. All of those are about being in the now, in the moment. And so I felt like, so that's really beautiful. So these 10 commandments, as I've called them in the past, these yamas and niyamas are really pointing us in the direction of a yogic life. That those are what we reap when we begin to cultivate these practices. So I did some investigation. I read through some of the many stacks of books that I have, just from Gurudev and Babaji and Swamiji, just those ones alone. And I found some very interesting pointers. So I'd like to share those with you tonight too. So I'll start with a little bit of what Babaji wrote to Gurudev about yogic lifestyle. And so also what came into me was, for me, what is it? And I seem to recall last time we were together, I expressed what it was to be living in an ashram for almost 3 weeks, and how there was a certain way of being that kind of arose. There was a routine, and so by eating sattvic food, by sleeping, more consistent hours, by being silent, by not engaging in my own desires, I was actually in service. Those things helped me to have a more sattvic life in the ashram. And so what I noticed is that from just simply that, I felt an expansion happen in my own sadhana that called me to put my attention more towards what is going to support that and booster that when I go home. So reading supports and boosters that. Being with, like-minded folks helps to booster and support that. Paying attention to my own sleep habits, paying attention to what I'm consuming, all of these pieces. And so even though I intellectually knew that before, the experience of living in ashram for that chunk of time actually started to turn that intellectual knowledge into experience, and therefore it became more established and somewhat more easeful to actually bring that home and just start to incorporate that in my family life, in my home life, in my work life, in our Yoga by the Sea ashram life. So one of the pieces that Babaji talks about is, and Gurudev talks about it too, he's like, keep doing your sadhana. And so I know he's talking about keep doing your sadhana as in your physical practice, right? And I've mentioned this before, it's like, well, of course, like, but I'm past that, you know. I don't need to do the sadhana. I'm doing other kind of sadhana. But actually the physical body is the temple of prana. So if we're to master prana and learn how to manage our prana, and that is like the most essential piece, because if we're not learning how to manage our prana, then it's not balanced and integrated. It's all over the place. And restless prana, restless mind, restless body. So the sadhana is really important. The physical practice of asana is important because it helps the body process those places where we get stuck, those places that are uncomfortable, and especially as we age too. And I know some of us feel that in our own body, that we don't have the same flexibility, we don't have the same stamina. So that sadhana, that movement, actually helps to increase that, okay? Increase that vitality. And then the other portion of that, which is ironic, pranayama, right? So pranayama is, again, it's not just breathing practices, it's managing prana. What it is, it's managing prana. So prana techniques. So we focus on the breath because that'll change our physical, mental, emotional, spiritual experience in the moment. And we begin to pay attention to, well, if I go out and drink with my girlfriends, when I wake up in the morning, I feel subdued. I feel lethargic. I feel not vital. If I eat ice cream at nighttime, I feel heavy. I feel achy. I feel kind of, what's the word?
Gummy.
Gummy, yeah, kind of gummy and gelatinous. So not vital. Whereas if I have a juice, a green juice or a smoothie, or I eat my main meal in the early, like mid to afternoon, and eat something light at night, and I don't eat late, and I get a good night's sleep, then I feel more vital. I feel more awake. And so just that is basically managing prana, pranayama. And then add in a pranayama breathing practice, add in that, and then that actually begins to purify the body, all of the nadis, the meridians, the mind, because the breath has an impact on the subtler mind, just as the mind has an impact on the more gross breath. So that's why if you want to change your mental, emotional, physical state, you change your breath, because it's the bridge. So then, in that experience of being a yogi, the next piece is pratyahara. And pratyahara is where I saw turtles everywhere, like turtle mania. It's like, oh my gosh. And someone even sent me a message and said, turtles in India? Turtles, because they're all in the temples, right? Turtles in India, turtles in Hawaii. What do you think that means? I'm like, I think it means pratyahara, baby. It's like all about withdraw your outgoing attention. And what's your outgoing attention? It's prana in the form of mind. So if you withdraw your outgoing attention to what's happening next, what is that person doing? What am I supposed to be doing? You know, the constant out, and we actually withdraw from that, then we actually are bringing our attention back inwards into right now. And when is the only time yoga happens? Right now. So that's another piece of being a yogi. So, and I know that when we're learning lots of new styles and techniques and you know, really diving into information, and we have so much, and our container is getting so full, right? We can feel like we're spinning a little bit, and it may get kind of confusing. That in itself is outgoing attention. So how do we we basically have to pull away from that because we're actually out of ourself. So we need to actually drop it and let go and rest back. Rest back. But what do we rest back into? Well, we all have had the experience of Yoga Nidra, right? And I use that, or meditation, okay, seated meditation, but I use Yoga Nidra because it's so profound. We know it when we rest in the depth of the ocean of that Yoga Nidra. We know that we don't know our name, we don't know where we are, we don't know how old we are, we don't know how long we've been there, we don't know if we have a body, all of these things, and that is that resting back, remembering that is who we are. And then the more we remember that, that's that eternal truth, and that begins to grow and expand. So every time we withdraw our outgoing attention and we rest back, we're actually building that knowing. We're building that knowing. We're building that container of knowing the eternal truth. That is being a yogi. So we withdraw from the disturbances. So let's say, okay, here's an example. I was sitting on the lanai, I was watching the kayakers, watching the paddleboarders, and there was two people, and I could tell you, because I'm a paddleboarder, they had no experience. We're in Hawaii, there's winds, there's weather, there's, changing currents. I grew up on the ocean. That ocean, it's not like climbing a mountain or walking through the forest. The ocean has a whole life of her own, and she's to be really revered. We kind of like lose our sense of grounding when we step into her, right? We basically surrender to the ocean when we step into her. So these two folks, they got on their paddle boards. They were new, felt like they just arrived the day before, early in the morning, got on their paddle boards, a husband and wife. She really wanted to paddleboard. He was supporting her. Neither one of them knew what they were doing, and they were falling off and drifting out. So that's kind of the setup. It's the first time anybody's really been on a board that we've seen all week where we were staying, and I'm watching and I'm going, oh my gosh, they don't know what they're doing. I'm like the lifeguard up on the 8th floor waiting for them to get into trouble. I'm gonna run downstairs and swim out there and help them. Not, but my mind was doing that, right? That's what was happening in my mind. I was like, oh my gosh, what are we gonna do? Are we gonna call 911? How are we gonna help them? I was so outside and disturbed by what was happening that I had absolutely no control over. But I continued to play the game. I continued to be outside of myself, engaged with what was happening, creating stories about it, dialogue moment by moment by moment. It was quite entertaining because I could see all of this outplay happening. Because of the practices of yoga, I could see all of this happening, but I was still leaning into it and still participating into it. So Pratyahara would say, stop. Lean back. Close your eyes. Turn your attention inward. Breathe. And then maybe mantra. Just that. The name of God. Just that. The name of the eternal truth. Just that. As a reminder to be established in what that is. So yogis are seekers. They're wanting to know the truth. And there's, some are just ordinary. I want to know a little bit. Some are kind of intermediate. I want to know a lot. And others are like so devout. The only thing is liberation for them. Like nothing else. They won't stop. They want liberation. They want to know what that is. And some others are just fine knowing a little bit, right? So you can kind of investigate for yourself. I mean, you're all here. My guess is that you want to know liberation. Because it's Easter weekend. You could be anywhere doing anything, and you chose to be here tonight. It's not that you didn't have anything else to do, right? So that tells me that you're extraordinary in your intention. And that's not a judgment on anybody. That just shows where your intention is, right? That just shows that. And so that's beautiful because you want to know God, you want to know love, you want to know consciousness, you want to know liberation, you want to know that. Perfect. It's probably been lifetimes to get you to this point. So here we are together, lifetimes together now. We're here. And so we just continue. And it doesn't matter what anyone else is doing, or where they are, or why they're not here, or why they're over there. It doesn't matter, because it's not about them. It's just about me. That's what I'm doing here. So when I was playing harmonium the other night, and I haven't even read to you this piece, when I was playing harmonium the other night, and I was playing, and I'm like, oh, satsang, nobody's coming, you know, maybe I should just forget about it, just, you know, it's not working, I don't, you know, maybe just stop. What flooded into me was like, satsang is not for anyone else to come and receive something from you. Satsang is for you, to actually sit in the seat and speak the teachings so they become more anchored in you and established in you, because that's what I want. To know, to have that be the expanse of the field that I'm living in. That's what is calling my heart, my deepest heart. So whether you're here or not, I would still be sitting here, reading or something, right? So you came as well. So here we are together. Here we are together. Jen's there too. We're all together. Okay. Do you have any questions so far? I can, you know me, I can talk up a blue streak.
I don't have a question.
Yeah.
I do really appreciate the way you made the understanding of brahmacharya less intellectual and much more tangible. Thank you.
It's not, it's by the grace. It's coming from the gurus, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But you still actually delivered it.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Leslie, was there something that came to you?
When you were speaking about the paddle borders,
Yes.
and then your mind was going.
Yes.
My question is, when does it click in that you have to call 911 or have to
Oh, yeah.
intervene a little bit instead of, you know, I'm just gonna sit here and meditate and watch these couple go out into the ocean and, you know, meant to be whatever. But when
Right.
does that kick in and have to
Yeah.
call my?
Well, in that scenario, there's a fine line. You just watch the commentary of the mind, and watch the outplay of what's happening. And it's like the circle of influence. Where is my circle of influence? They rented from someone is responsible, they signed a waiver, and there are other people out there. So there's like another kayak, and there's another paddleboarder. So there are other people out there. So it's like a dance watching this happen. And even so, it was more the propensity in the mind that was saying they don't know what they're doing, they're gonna get in trouble, when really they were fine. There were some moments when I think they were nervous and past their edge and all of that, and but for the most part they were fine, and they didn't really go that far, really. They were within the barrier, the boundary of the coral reef.
And there's me getting stuck in the story. to
Right,
survive.
exactly. So then what happened? Exactly. What happened?
That points right
So-
to that. There's the story.
I had so much of a story around the husband, actually. What he was saying, what he was thinking, he never stood up, and I'm like, he's just so totally there to support her. It was so interesting, like, and it's all subjective. I have no idea. Maybe he's the one that really wanted to go out, and she was supporting him. You know, who knows? It's made up. It's imagination, and that's the part that is mostly is made up. It's mostly made up. Whatever we think is mostly made up, because we have no idea what somebody else is doing or thinking at all. Everything is subjective. And it's on a need-to-know basis. Do I really need to know that? I don't really need to know that. But it's teaching ourselves that and catching ourselves in those moments. And that's that turnaround technique that Gurudev talks about. It's like that pratyahara. It's like, oh, I don't actually need to know that. That is subjective, you know. And then beginning to see those patterns that we have in ourselves. When we say, I think this, it's like, well, you might think that, but it isn't necessarily what's really going on.
That real svadhyaya.
Svadhyaya.
Yeah, so starting to notice what arises in yourself and the tendencies and the habits that arise in yourself, and then really knowing that that's
Right?
your thought patterns or your behavior patterns or your
Yeah.
emotional patterns. And it's only then when you actually can see them for what they are that you can actually choose.
To not or
To
to
not,
get.
or to- yeah.
Yes, exactly. To engage or not engage. Exactly. Exactly. And so then it becomes that divine play, that divine dance. Yeah. Beautiful. So let's see what I can share with you from letters. Okay, it's one of my favorite books. So Gurudev had written a letter to Bapaji, and Bapaji was responding to him. And it was basically, Gurudev had written a letter about, saying that he has now made a commitment to practice yoga sadhana. And this was in 1967. And I'm sure that Gurudev had made that commitment many times, but we always, for myself, I always find that I'm always coming back and saying, no, I'm really, it's like steps. It's always little steps. So what it says here is, Bapaji is saying, I'm extremely happy to hear you've made a firm commitment to practice yoga sadhana. In yoga sadhana, the practice of yama and niyama, asana and pranayama happens in the most appropriate way. Then only one can progress further. Those who've created temptations for yoga siddhis, which are like those special powers, have distracted real sadhaks, which means as we purify, we get these special, like our intuition deepens, or we can maybe extra sensory perception happens. And some people, if their mind is not pure, will use those to their advantage, right? It's like a manipulation, or it's an ego-driven thing. And that actually is not the intent, right? So when that happens, that becomes a distraction or a disturbance, right? So Bapaji is saying that, the path of yoga, siddhis, and the path of liberation are two different paths, right? The siddhis are actually creating the bondage, and the liberation is the expansiveness of where that eternal truth lies. So those who get entangled in the siddhis cannot do real sadhana because they're caught, they're entangled, right? Being a yogi is not becoming a snake charmer. A yogi does not do all kinds of drama to deceive people. A yogi has to give appropriate guidance to society. The accomplished yogi has all kinds of siddhis, but those siddhis are actualized only after reaching the ultimate stage. By showing miracles, society is attracted, that's true, but in that it brings distraction to both. So we're not showing our talents and anything to say, look at me, how great of a yogi I am. No, it's actually we become more humble, we become less engaged in the world in some ways, more deep in our sadhana. We're kind of retreating in some ways, where we're less out there in the world and more in this world. And then also in service, he does talk about service somewhere in one of these books. The accomplished yogi is the representative of God. Okay, and we've talked about God being consciousness, love. It can It isn't necessarily the white man with a beard on the top of the mountain. God is that constantly present eternal truth that is unchanging, universal, and timeless. So the accomplished yogi stays thousands of miles away from the propagation of such propaganda. Right? They're not getting pulled into drama. They see it like, I'm not actually going to go in there. Even if it causes a disturbance within them, which it may cause a disturbance within them because their own reactive patterns, their own habits get triggered. But instead of going in, they actually turn to their sadhana, to reading, to scripture, to yoga practice, to help things move, to pranayama, to help, shift that physical, mental, emotional, spiritual state. Okay? So yogis do get disturbed, but they use the tools and the techniques of yoga to help them withdraw their outgoing attention to whatever is poking them. In spite of that, there is a divine energy that surrounds the yogi. Okay? The divinity touches people, and because of it, there comes a big shift in society, in the nation. And that's like community. That's community, and the community grows and grows and grows. And by his presence, people become innocent, are giving, and do good work and exercise self-control, just simply from being in the presence of a yogi. It's kind of like contagious, right? So that's why the satsang and the yoga sadhana is for me, as it is for each of you to attend to for yourself, and that the impact is like a wave that radiates out from you, so that other people are receiving what you're giving to yourself energetically. That's the energetic transmission, almost by osmosis. So then Babaji continues to go on, and he talks about the deep shift and Gurudev's mental and physical transformation, and that the path is very difficult. It's not it's not something that we're going to get there in the end. I'm going to finally achieve liberation. Again, this has taken lifetimes even just to get here in this moment. So it could still take lifetimes to get to that point of liberation. And it's not really about the end game. It's actually knowing that we are liberated in the moment, right? Knowing the moksha, the truth, the eternal truth of I am not born. I do not die. I am not this body. I am constantly present. Presence, universal, timeless, and unchanging. That everything about me is shifting all the time in this energetic form. But what's not changing is that God presence, that love presence, that consciousness is not changing. But everything that's transmuting as energy is changing. So Babaji goes on to talk about as you progress further, the difficulties continue to increase. So just when you think, oh good, it's just getting so much easier, I've got to, I'm getting further down the path, and next thing you know, there's a little bit of constriction with the closest relationships that seem to vibrate the biggest, right? Or the challenges seem to be mountainous, and yet some things are effortless, right? In order to remove them, the only powerful tool is non-attachment. That sounds like Aprigraha. Isn't that amazing? So we can already see we're talking about brahmacharya, just from managing our energy to non-attachment, Aprigraha. So these two, the life of a yogi, being a yogi, what is a yogi, is so clearly attuned with Aprigraha, non-attachment. So just as the degree of your non-attachment grows, the attraction of the yoga cities begin to diminish, and the attraction for yoga cities makes men very restless. As soon as one becomes restless, his ability to discriminate disappears and the person gets distracted and takes the wrong path. So instead of becoming a yogi, he becomes a propagandist or a snake charmer. Okay? So Babaji simply reminds Gurudev and all of us in this writing that make sure you do your asana practice. Make sure you do your pranayama practice. And then he says, focus your attention on your meditation. And if you're sitting in meditation and you find that you want to fold forward, fold forward. And if you're sitting in meditation and you find you want to move back, allow yourself to move back. Prana is naturally, as you're tuned to that tuning fork or that tuning rod of the spine, prana is awakening in there, and so it's prompting you to move in a particular way. But if you're moving out of restlessness, that's a restless mind, right? He also says, don't forget that you have to keep your mind happy and your body alert. So you give your mind something to focus on, right? Keep your body healthy, right? If you're able to establish this, only then will you be able to progress. Gurudev says, keep doing your sadhana. Keep doing your sadhana. Only after food is ingested is there alertness in the body. Exercise should be performed enough to digest food to the degree where you can maintain your body alertness, right? So we don't eat a big meal before we practice yoga, right? We're eating small amounts. The body needs to digest. The body is moving. It would be if you were able to establish a friendship between the food you eat and the exercise you perform, then your efforts will be successful. So he's also talking about relationship with ourselves and how we eat, what we're ingesting, how we're ingesting. Are we walking? Are we talking? Are we sitting? Gurudev said eating is like yoga practice. And it says so right there. That's what Babaji told him. Right there, the relationship between eating, your digestion, and your movement. Then he continues to say, have the best friends, the best books, good thinking, good behavior, and a well-disciplined life. Babaji said this, Swami Kripalu said this to Gurudev in 1967. Gurudev had already been a student of his for at least 17 years at this point. With this combination, your progress on the path of light is bound to happen. So it comes back to energy follows attention. So if you put your attention on going out, partying, eating ice cream, staying up late, watching, I watched Game of Thrones last night. I was super happy about it. But spending, binge watching on Netflix, right, for example, or not getting up in the morning, not doing your sadhana, focusing only on work, right? All of those things are going to be oppressive and not supporting your yogic life, right? The practices that help you to feel buoyant, like good company, people, like-minded people that you can just, don't even have to talk to, you just with, right? That healthy food, the good sleep, very simple life, that helps to clear us so that we are more buoyant, so that we can be more established in knowing the truth. And I'll just share with you one more thing before I finish this and we move on to some questions or conversation. Being away for 10 days, 2 weeks was fantastic. Restful, no routine, no responsibility. It was the first time in probably 4 years that I've had a holiday like that. No kids, didn't have to go anywhere, didn't have to take care of the studio. It was just really nice to have this time. Coming home, even though I'm very rested, coming home was a transition, weather-wise, and then I had to jumpstart myself. Even though I was eating well and I was doing yoga and meditating, it's something different. It's like, oh, I have to cultivate that routine again. How do I do that? And I felt very lethargic and I didn't want to do it. I was like, nope, I've lost something. It's gone. How am I ever going to get that back, what I had before I went away? But by getting up in the morning, just today, getting up, practice yoga meditation, pranayama, good smoothie, get into the yoga studio, teach a class. It's like chop wood, carry water. Just that, actually, preparing for tonight, just that helped anchor me so that I feel more balanced and integrated. It's familiar, but it's also putting my attention where I want my energy to go, right? So my energy was like over here, kind of sloshing around, not certain what to do. But as soon as I put my attention on the discipline, the energy rose to that, right? So I think that is enough for now in terms of a yogic life. We'll come to a Aprigraha in a moment. But is there any questions, commentary on what we just investigated?
I'm curious about the no choice of choice. So we take choiceless action, like we decide to do something and it's a conscious choice. But then in that moment, you decided to pratyahara with the people on the ocean, and you decided to withdraw. And so, well, now that I'm saying it out loud that way, that was a choice in itself, right? But the choice of having of not doing anything, so not reacting, or okay, it's potato chips or carrots, right? But actually I'm not going to choose either. I'm going to drink water. So, or, you know, just choosing between the potato chips or carrots, like, is no choice a choice, is, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Absolutely. No choice is a choice. And you are free to make a choice. And just don't give yourself a hard time about it, right? So if you choose to not carrots and not potato chips, just water, that's a choice. Or even nothing, that's a choice. And be okay with it. Don't go, gosh, I wish I would have had the carrots because I'm really hungry. And now I didn't have the carrots, and now what am I going to do? I'm hungry and there's no carrots and I don't want to eat the potato chips and that's all that's left, and you know, just that, right? So that just is a mind game. That's an entanglement.
Yeah, and there's a second part to that, because when we have a choice, when we take action, that initiates karma. I'll use that term. I don't know if it's correct, but it initiates a karmic reaction. And so in not making a choice or choosing nothing, is there a karmic reaction in that?
Of course.
The karmic outcome.
Of course, because of what's going on in the mind.
What's going on in the mind in a no choice situation?
Yeah.
Well, you're still making a choice, that's what we gathered.
And where is that choice coming, that no choice coming from?
Well, it could be coming from the mind, or it could be coming from, you know, a true desire not to, after intellectually playing out the scenario, it's like, I'm good, you know what I mean? Like you've said in the past,
Checking in with
right?
prana.
Yeah, you've said in the past, like, you know, prepare to do the thing, the response that you want to take, but then wait an hour or 24 hours or 2 weeks, right?
And see what
then
happens.
see what happens. So, yeah, it's just interesting to me how it's just, the no choice is interesting to me, as well as, you know, the effect, right? The action of no choice. Anyway.
Sometimes when we make no choice, the choice happens anyway. Like sometimes it's revealed. Let's say somebody needs to go visit a family member who's sick and they can't make a decision whether they should go or not go. So they make no choice, and then the family member gets sick and dies, and then they have to go, right? And so it's kind of like there's like a forcing kind of, it needs to happen this way, right? It's like life will show us the way often. And those moments of like, do I have carrots or potato chips or water? Checking in with your prana body. What's prana telling you? Maybe you really need the potato chips. For some reason, you really need the salt and the oil. Okay. So if you eat the potato chips and you go, oh man, I feel like I'm 10 pounds overweight, and why I just ate those potato chips, and now I'm just, kind of adding more weight, and you're giving myself a hard time. I have to go for a run for like an hour just to make up for eating those potato chips. So that's all mind stuff, right? Whereas if you just eat the potato chips because you connected with, salt and oil, that feels right. Or a glass of wine, or a beer, or a chocolate cake, or carrots. That's where that managing of prana, where you attune to that, then that begins to show you where the direction is. So that choicelessness is no longer a choice, it's actually being shown to you.
It's more like a felt sense than a
Mental.
And the more, at least this is what, from my own experience, putting prana back into the body, not letting prana go to the mind, and feeling my way through life, which is new to me, but it's remarkable to me how the body there's an intelligence within the body, and there's an intelligence in the prana, and when you start to pay attention to it, it doesn't take very long for the energy and the body to start to tell you very quickly what you need or don't need.
That self-regulation that we're pointing to.
And it's just remarkable when you stop giving the energy to the mind, the thoughts don't come.
The fire starts to burn out.
Yes. Yeah. It's sort of like, if you've got children, little kids, and if you keep paying attention, if they keep like, mom, 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 and you keep answering them, they're just going to keep on. But if you just let them keep on doing their mom, 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 eventually they just stop.
Yeah.
Because you're not paying attention to it. It's the same thing with the mind.
It is.
But I find it really helpful to put the energy in the body, because it's hard to not pay attention to the mind.
Because it's more
if
subtle.
You're not putting your energy somewhere, or your attention somewhere else. So putting it in the body was really helpful, because it also then builds your
Prana body. Absolutely.
And your awareness of what
that is. Yeah. Beautiful.
Although I had a really big test today.
Did you?
Yeah, I had a really big test with that. In relationship, in my closest relationship with my spouse. And it's just really interesting just to pay attention to what distracts you, right? So, like, could really feel the energy in the body big time, but I still wanted to go back up into the mind, and I could feel all that happening, and I could feel it wanting to go up, and I could feel how if I let it in there for a moment, something would come out of my mouth that wouldn't have helped the situation. And so the only way I can deal with it is to close my eyes and inwardly use mantra.
Pratyahara.
And then it's like, that went. It's almost amazing how all of a sudden the mind just is empty. You can still feel the prana in the body, you can still feel the sensation, but all those thoughts that were starting to come are just gone.
Kind of leveled from the mantra
Yeah,
and the pranayama from the mantra.
yeah.
Mhm.
And then the sort of that sort of energy, even in the relationship, that in that moment, that energy just starts to dissipate.
Mhm. 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 Beautiful. So we went from pratyahara to concentrating on one thing, right? Putting your attention on one thing, and that one thing helped to shift what was happening with the mind. So it gave the mind something to do, exactly that.
Yeah,
And then meditation happens.
yeah.
Yeah. Was there anything else on that? The choice and the choicelessness and choiceless awareness?
Yeah, it's just interesting the energy around being in a family unit, right?
Mhm.
And how your choice or no choice, whatever that is, affects people around you. Anyway, just interesting to me. Yeah, it just adds another layer to it all, right?
Mhm.
So, you know, we can actually, yeah, I mean, we can just turn off the story there and just, it just is, so, yeah.
Because then we move to that non-attachment, right?
Mhm.
Like, how important is it? Right? How important is it, really? And so then it's like, I have the right to action, but not the fruits of my action,
Mm-hmm.
as spoken in the Bhagavad Gita. Like, I can make a choice, I can go in a direction, but I don't know what's going to happen when I get there. Like, I don't know what the outplay is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, potatoes, tomatoes, like, how important is it really? Because we're not this life, we're not this body, we're not our relationships. The real, true relationship we have is knowing the truth. That's the main relationship. And so there was about prana and that choice, being free to make a choice. You know, you can always change the direction, right? You're always free to change. But also, is this, if we have a general intention, like what we're working on in the teacher training program, if we have a general intention or a primary intention, we can always refer back to that intention. Is this, you know, leading me in the direction of my intention? So if we had a secondary intention, for example, say that, let's say I was a smoker and I didn't want to smoke anymore, and certain things were happening in my day-to-day life that I would default to smoking. And so I began to see the pattern of these things that were kind of rolling out, and then I would maybe ask myself, are these things that I keep getting caught in helping me with smoking or hindering me from not smoking, right? And then I begin to change my behaviors because I see, like, well, if I don't want to smoke, then I actually have to stop going to the bars and hanging out with smokers, because back in the day there were people who were smoking in the bars, right? That's not the case anymore. But, or if I want to stop smoking, I have to stop buying cigarettes, kind of thing, right? Just those kinds of things. So, for example,
Yeah, it's good. I appreciate the opportunity to just say it out loud, and then
Yeah.
kind of just answers itself.
yeah, it does for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else before we move on to Aprigraha? I'm just going to read what, so Jen said, aloha from the ferry terminal. I can't watch the stream on data, but look forward to watching it tomorrow. And then she said something else. So much love, looking forward to what shows up. And then John's there. Our brother husband's there, Jai Bhagwan. He's watching. And it's his birthday today. Happy birthday! Yay! I know, he's smiling big right now.
You can split screen and invite people. if you ever want to do that.
Oh, we'll do that another time. Yeah, that sounds fun. Okay. So Aprigraha, going to non-attachment. And so this is, there's quite a bit of reading here. This is from Yatra, The Pilgrim of Love. This is another one of Babaji's books that I picked up in Malav, and here's the picture of the temple in Malav. I know that Satya has been there before. So it says here that that the Sanskrit Aprigraha means to store or accumulate with strong attachment, to cling firmly to, or to fasten completely to. Since the prefix a means not, Aprigraha therefore has the opposite meaning. So to firmly give up and to not accumulate or hoard. Okay, Aprigraha means to give up, not accumulate or hoard, or non-attachment. So it speaks here that Babaji will discuss non-attachment as it pertains to the needs of 3 types of spiritual seekers. So 3 types of yogis: the ordinary yogi, the intermediate yogi, and the ideal yogi. Now, we have to remember that some of the terminology is quite old, probably not politically correct in some ways, but I think you kind of get the idea. And so what he says is that a moderate degree of non-attachment can be attained by an intermediate seeker. True non-attachment can be attained only by the ideal seeker. So the highest seeker is looking only for liberation. So that seeker would be the renunciate, who would basically release his or her attachment to all things, family, possessions, everything, and then would take a vow of maybe of silence and maybe not eat, maybe not wear any clothing, and they would become like a true sadak, or what's the word? I can't think of the word anyway. A swami, a renunciate. Someone who renounces everything. Renouncing, this is what really stood out for me. Firmly renouncing his attachment to the illusionary world. Okay, so the illusionary world, right? The illusionary world is everything we see, everything we believe to be true, right? Everything we believe to be true. So when we chant the Asatama prayer, we're asking to be led from the unreal, which is the illusion, to the real, timeless, unchanging, universal, constantly present. From darkness, which is that suffering and struggle because we're caught in what is unreal, in the illusion, to the light, knowing that liberation. From time-bound consciousness to a timeless state of being that we are. So moving from that time-bound, birth and death, to knowing that we are timeless, right? And so that prayer of intention is actually the seed of the yamas and niyamas, and it's the seed of the teachings. So the ideal seeker still desires liberation. So there's still a desire in there, right? Which is kind of interesting. It's like there's still that desire for liberation. And he remains attached to non-attachment. Do you see? I'm a renunciate. I've given up everything, but I'm attached to that non-attachment, right? It's a bit of a conundrum, right? A little bit of a conundrum. Because one can practice sadhana only according to one's capacity, right? And our capacity is constantly evolving, constantly shifting and growing. That's why, as a yogi, part of that is the sadhana and realizing that the more attention you put on good relations, you know, the physical practices, the pranayama practices, sleeping, discipline, that will grow your capacity to house more prana, to feel more vital, right? So that as we grow our capacity, then our spiritual journey expands. So seekers beginning their spiritual journey must start from a state of high attachment. High attachment. So that's a very interesting thing, because and gradually travel in the direction of non-attachment, right? So you can probably see for yourself, and as a new teacher, right, you want to have lots of classes, right? And, touch people in lots of different ways. So there's definitely some attachment in that. And over the course of service and over the course of your unfolding as a yogi, that will become less and less of a desire, right? You will become less attached to that. But right now, because you're growing your yoga business, that's something that is like, there's a little bit of an attachment there. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? And as you become more, as you grow in your capacity as a yoga sadhak, sadhu is the word I was thinking of, as a yogi, then you still continue to do that. The outplay will be the same success, but the identification with it will be less. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Yeah. Which is beautiful, because you still get to reap the benefits, still reaping the benefits of the practice, but not with leaning in. It's actually just seeing what happens and noticing how it all comes to fruition without us doing as much, right? And I speak that not only from obviously reading that, but also from my own experience too, of having that same kind of momentum, right? Of wanting to cultivate and create something, and yet seeing what happens when over the course of time, in my capacity to just be with what is, what continues to happen, It just naturally flows without me having to direct it. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it sort of, to me, seems like the difference between personal will and almost a different kind of, like almost a
Thy will.
thy will. Yeah,
Mhm.
or, yeah.
Yeah. And so in one of these books, I think it was in this one actually, it kind of points to that a little bit. And it talks about determination, being determined. In the beginning, we need determination, right? In the beginning, we need that determination, right? Because our mind will waver. So we need the determination, we need the goal, we need the intention, we need the clear vision. I'm going in that direction. We need that. Sankalpa, right? We need that. And then we also need an extraordinary love, a passion for something, right? We need to have that. I have this, I'm so inspired. I have to, go in this direction because of that inspiration, right? An extraordinary love. It says a unique aspect of yoga sadhana is that wholehearted practice of any one technique spontaneously elicits the entire spectrum of yogic techniques in a natural sequence. So that extraordinary love that we're completely enthralled with. And then we also need faith. And that's where we move towards the, not my will, but thy will. Faith that everything will be revealed, everything will be shown, everything will be taken care of, right? That, we are tested, but that we're always provided for. Say that again?
We're always pure, free, forever, unborn, undying, so really...
That's right.
What does it matter?
That's right. What does it matter? And so, and even knowing that takes some cultivation, takes some time, takes some purification, right? Because that is not something that we know like that, right? We have to be shown that and over and over and over until some moment happens and we're like, oh, I get what that means. Pure, free, forever. unborn, undying. I understand what that is. And so then it makes sense. And then yoga begins. Like then that's the guru yoga. That is the knowing. Right? And the last part of that is action. So we have the determination, we have this inspiration of love, we have this faith, and then we have action. Right? So we need all of those things for our yoga sadhana, to be a yogi.
And then you just are.
And of course, behind all that, you just are. Right? Behind all of that, you just are. You always have been and you never won't be. Right? So it's kind of an interesting, it's like a tying up and an untying and a going around, and it's all this very intricate, and we always end up kind of back in the same place of this knowing who we are and who we are not. Right? So we're learning who we are not, and we're learning who we are.
Would it be more of a bringing it back and reminding of who we are?
Yeah, for
We are
sure.
not. So, because we come into this world already knowing that.
Exactly.
And then the world starts piling all
Yeah.
this crap on.
Yep.
And now we're here peeling those layers back to be reminded of what we truly are.
Absolutely.
Because we already knew.
That's
We
right.
just forgot.
We forgot. That's right. We already knew, we just forgot. And if you remember from our last weekend, we talked about living from the foundation. Like initially we're living from the biological centers, right? We're living from those biological centers, of course, because that's our human existence. And at some point, we actually make the leap where we begin to live from that spiritual foundation, from the foundation of the heart. That instead of living in fear, control, addiction, attachment, we begin to live from that place of love and faith. And that begins to be how we move through the world, right? But we still pay attention to those moments when fear jumps in, or control, manipulation jump in, or addiction jumps in. Okay, we still begin to know, we still notice that. But over the course of time, less and less is that how we're engaging with life. And more living from a place of empowerment, faith, and trust. And that's how our capacity grows, right? That's how it continues to grow in that direction. Babaji also talks about non-attachment comes gradually. Okay, so when a school teacher solves a math problem on the blackboard, does he solve it for himself? No, he solves it for his students. So non-attachment grows when we give knowledge or perform, this is interesting, any selfless action. Non-attachment grows when we perform any selfless action. So Babaji says, I love to teach very much. And even the ancient seers of India continued teaching after they had become fully liberated. They did not teach because they were attached to the scriptures. Why then did they teach? They were not actually performing any actions in the usual sense. Their actions were actually a form of inaction, selfless service, where there was no karmic connection there. There was no identification or attachment to what the outcome would be. So any action which is not motivated by selfish desire is actually considered a form of inaction. So we're talking about karma. What is the intention behind that, right?
I think that's interesting because that's kind of where I was going, but I didn't quite know what it was. So that's...
For example, any action which is performed for the love of God or for public welfare or dedicated to Brahma or Prana, for example, or spontaneously inspired by love is action in action and the best of all forms of non-attachment. We may use any action to acquire happiness, either for ourselves or for others. And when we perform actions for other, however, we receive greater joy. This heightened joy is not simple joy in the usual sense. It is in fact the grace. It is in fact grace. So a person begins to recognize his own individualized existence a few years after birth. And at the moment he begins to distinguish between yours and mine, he plants the roots of attachment. Even if he had unlimited power and could accumulate everything he ever wanted, several large cities could not hold all of it. With all our attachments, if somebody approached us and asked us to consider practicing non-attachment, we would scorn their suggestion. Right? We're so attached, we can't, right? We're so attached to our attachments. So it's very difficult to move from attachment to non-attachment, as it is to move from earth to sky. Non-attachment simply cannot be achieved in a single bound. Only a gradual, step-by-step ascent is possible. So as we are more and more able to absorb a principle, our behavior changes gradually and our personal effort becomes easier. If 1,000 pounds of grain were piled in front of us, do you think we could eat it all in one day? Of course not. However, if we had over 100 years to live, we could eat 20 piles that big. So a person should practice non-attachment as best that he can or she can, whether he is a worldly person or a renunciate. Because remember, we can only practice from where we are, right? According to one's capacity of where we are right now. And everyone is unique in that. So there's no judgment. It's not like, oh, I want to be more enlightened. Well, I can't be more enlightened. I can just be here in this moment. And maybe I'm in light in this moment, but as soon as I want to get somewhere else, I'm no longer here, right? So I'll just read this last paragraph. I think this was the last piece around Aprigraha. So we are born with attachment, so naturally we want to accumulate things. And now that we have accumulated so much, we have a list of countless attachments in our memory, right? So time is mind, and memory is mind, and imagination is mind. Under these circumstances, from what door will the poor idea of non-attachment enter our mind? Where's it going to come from? It's not exactly. Fortunately, non-attachment is extremely patient and tolerant. It doesn't have a preference, right? It has been standing outside the door of our mind for many lifetimes, and it will enter whenever we call it. And then the dawn of knowledge, jnana, devotion or bhakti, and yoga will break. And then, now is yoga. And then we are a yogi. The illusion. So what questions or comments or thoughts do you have coming around all of that? So tell me a little bit about yogi, being a yogi for you, Satya. Share with us what that looks like for you.
I was playing with right when you were the attachment to being a yogi.
Yes.
And so to let go of that attachment. And what does that involve? And you just are again. And it's okay. If you let go of all the attachments to what a good yogi does or doesn't do, then whether you do your practice or not, you can still be a yogi.
Absolutely.
You've let go of all the attachment for what you think, because that's a mind thing. I don't know, I was just playing with that. You struck something and now it's just turning it around.
So moving away from that discipline of chopping wood and carrying water, kind of fulfilling all the criteria to be a yogi, if you will.
Yes, because if you've gone through all the discipline and you've gone through all the inspiration, and then you just are. And like you say, the sadhus, are they attached to, if they're hungry, whether you give them meat or vegetables or where they sleep? They're not. They just are.
They just are.
And so all those things that we think make us a yogi, we can let go of. Pure freedom forever, I like that.
There you go, pure freedom forever. It's absolutely right. And then there's that other piece around the discipline is important because it actually purifies the mind, right? So that premature transcendence happens when we actually don't partake in cleaning out the clock, if you will, right? So doing the due diligence to actually take care of those disciplines until we can then see more clearly, right? The Yoga Sutras. So you know that because you have had that experience, and then continually reminding yourself wherever you are and whatever's going on, I'm actually okay right here. I am okay because I'm pure free forever.
And the minute that I put my intention to going somewhere or doing something, I start losing that. Right? Because then you go back to that place of grasping, the place of searching for. It's that fine line.
It's almost as though the moment you attach to mind again, you're grasping. It's like Aprigraha.
So it comes back to that paying attention, attuning to the prana body. Paying attention to that. So if there's a grasping, there's a constriction and a restriction. So paying attention to where is that ease, that natural, fluid experience, where you can still move you can still move along in a direction, and you can always change directions, but you're attuning to not what's happening out there, but what's happening in here. That constant attention to what's happening here. Not in a constricting, I've got to pay attention, but like, let me just check in. Do I want carrots or potato chips in this moment?
Witnessing.
Because you're not in your mind when you ask that.
You're checking in with your prana body.
But who is checking in with the prana?
But who is checking in with the prana body? Exactly. Yeah.
Well, we still have to exist, right?
And we do exist, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, we don't do this in a vacuum, right? Like, yoga doesn't happen in a vacuum.
No.
You know, like, we're household people living a yogic lifestyle. We've made some renunciation, but not completely, because we have our families, we have our jobs, you know, our houses. So, how do we exist? That's the big question that I've been rolling around in my head, is like, okay, yeah, sure, we could be monks or be a nun or whatever and renounce everything. And I mean, even Gurudev hasn't completely renounced, even though he's very much on this spiritual path. And it's obvious, right, when you come into the presence of him, even through a device like this. But, and so, yeah, it's curious to me how we can live in this existence, this wave form, and still be on that divine path.
Well, because we're divine,
Yeah.
right? We're divine. And the other piece you're pointing to is like the renunciation. We talk about renunciates and we talk about householders, and actually renunciation happens in the moment. So the renunciation is that pratyahara, that turnaround technique that happens in the moment. So when we catch ourselves going, like being pulled out into grasping, into chitta, into thinking, right? Into mind stuff, into subjective, projections or memory, then we know that that's actually, we're getting entangled. And so the moment that we catch that, we actually withdraw and we renounce that in that moment. And that doesn't make us a yogi necessarily, but that allows us to be present in the moment. And yoga is being with what is as it is. So then we would be a yogi in that moment.
Yeah, I mean, practicing yoga years ago, I didn't even know I was being yogic. I mean, I did
Yeah.
asana, but just part of what I was doing was the yogic lifestyle. I didn't know it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not till years later you look back and you go, oh, I was already kind of practicing
Right.
that already, right? In a different genre or
Sure.
arena or
Yeah.
whatever, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of, people may be yogis and they don't even know it.
Lots of people are yogis and they
Yeah.
don't have a
Framework.
a frame over, like a title of yoga over their head, acharya or something. Yeah. Farmers, lots of farmers, and just all kinds of people that live simply and humbly and are attuned to what's happening right now. They're yogis. Mm-hmm.
Or even like you say, as a householder, we step out of that place, you check the ferry schedule, you decide or whatever you need to do
Mm-hmm.
to go and start accomplishing something that you set your mind to do. But that doesn't mean that along the way you don't have to start making comments about how the traffic's going and that idiot driver and blah, 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 and then somebody else asks the question, so you have to interfere. All that can be left aside.
Absolutely.
And that's when you stay in that centered yogic space.
Mm-hmm.
Because in that moment, for example, with using the ferries, you choose where to put your attention. So if you make a ferry reservation on a holiday weekend, you're saving energy by creating that reservation. So then you can save energy, but then you're wasting energy if you're heading to the ferry and look at the stupid driver. And so all that energy that you put into saving energy is wasted when your
If
mind
you're going to
stuff.
fret about whether or not it really is going to happen, whether you're going to get on it, I listened to the Facebook and somebody said they're not getting on, blah, 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 blah.
And you made all these plans
And so your intention was to be on there. But if you're not, then that's okay too.
and being at peace with what is in that moment that you didn't make it. Okay, let's go this way, or let's do this, or go change plans.
Exactly.
And be at peace with the plans that are being shown to you that you didn't already have planned in your head.
Exactly. Exactly.
And you're so full of energy when you get there, finally. Because you've been
Haven't
peaceful.
used it all.
Yes.
Anything else? So I'd like to do a little chanting, but the one thing I'd really like you to take away with you is the illusion. If I can find that again, that illusion. Where did I see that? Oh, I don't even know where it was now. That the sadhak, the seeker, the yogi, firmly renounces his attachment to the illusionary world. So recognizing that everything we see, everything we experience is, and what we mean by illusionary is, again, it's like it's unreal. It's constantly changing. So what's real? That which doesn't change, right? And so we constantly are getting attached to that which is constantly changing. And so you can begin to see that in your own outplay, your day-to-day life, where that shows up, whether it's work or with its kids or with fairy schedules or whatever it is, right? You can begin to see that and go, oh, that's constantly changing. The fairy schedule is constantly changing, the timing is constantly changing, but what is not changing? That's what's real. It's constantly present, timeless and unchanging, and that is that space that we experience in Yoga Nidra. That is that space that we experience in meditation, that is beyond the name, the roles, the age, the gender, beyond all of that, beyond birth, beyond death. So just start to notice that, those attachments to the illusion, and then you can begin to go, oh, so in my sadhana, right, in my sadhana, paying attention to those moments, and oh, non-attachment. How important is that? How important is that fairy schedule? How important is it a life or death situation? It may be. Whose life and death? And if it is a life and death situation, I am not this body. This is a temple for love and consciousness, Brahma, for God, but it dissolves. But what doesn't dissolve? The timeless, unchanging, universal presence. That's what's not changing. So this body is changing. The mind changing. The breath changing. So anyway, so I invite you to take that with you. So let's chant Pure Free Forever. As our beloved Padmaji is coming next weekend for the teacher training weekend and the divine self-discovery. Amaram hum, madaram hum, 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 amaram hum, Hum rum hum, Maduram hum. 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 Hum rum hum, Maduram Just take it inside. With the deepest gratitude for this lineage of masters, that these teachings have been handed down from Dadaji to Babaji to Gurudev to Kaminiji and now us. Jai Bhagwan. Jai Bhagwan. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a beautiful, blissful night. And happy Easter. Carry love in your heart.
That was a beautiful thing to do on Easter.
Beautiful, right? So beautiful.
So beautiful.
Grateful for your sharing, for your investigations, inspirations.